Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War News Update, third part thereof for the 31st of July 2024. This is a military aid and geopolitics video. Try and get through all of this information as concisely as possible, but you know me. Ukraine is to receive $7.85 billion in US aid. The first tranche is expected in the coming weeks. After Russian strikes damaged Ukrainian energy infrastructure, US also committed $500 million to energy assistance. So this is USA in a move to bolster Ukraine's battered energy infrastructure after the Russian strikes. That $500 million has been offered in a new energy assistance and redirected an additional $324 million for urgent energy needs. So Ukrainian Prime Minister Shmyhal announced that Ukraine will receive $7.85 billion in direct budget support from the US in 2024, and the first $3.9 billion already expected in the coming weeks. That's obviously pretty huge. The discussions also centered on recent G7 decision to allocate $50 billion to Ukraine from future revenues of frozen Russian assets. Shmyhal expressed Ukraine's aim to access these funds starting 2025, emphasizing the importance of flexibility in their use, including for military needs. Obviously, that's super important. G7 is expected to finalise a framework for the $50 billion loan package for Ukraine by October 2024, and that will be backed by approximately $300 billion in frozen Russian central bank assets seized after the beginning of the invasion. So a lot of money, and this $500 million in new energy assistance and for the energy sector support that's really, really vital. Ukraine is absolutely suffering. And, you know, you have this argument that, they should only receive a military aid. But of course, if you have no country for the military to be able to defend, then it's kind of pointless. So you need a viable Ukraine as a nation state in order to have a viable army, armed forces to fight on behalf of that viable state to take on Russia. Okay, Ukraine will receive additional air defense systems in August, September and October, according to Zelensky. He emphasized that ensuring the protection of industrial and economic centers with a sufficient number of air defense systems is a priority. I would argue that they also need some offensive air defense systems, so offensive air defense. So you need those Patriots near the front line to shoot down some of the Russian planes dropping the guided glide bombs. Now, we have actually, let's look a little bit into this. So thanks to our work with our work and partners, we are increasing the number of Patriots and other systems. As mentioned, therefore, we continue to work in this direction. August, September, October, there will be appropriate systems in our state. I can't tell you how many we have or will have. However, he described the NATO summit decision to provide Ukraine with 5 Patriot systems as very serious. Obviously, there's still talk about the Israeli systems that might well be provided for Ukraine, or to Ukraine. 8 systems in total. They have PAC-2 systems. Right, the big news, I've already reported this in my breaking news update, is that Ukraine has received their first F-16 fighter jets. They are not thought to be receiving too many in 2024. Some people are saying around maybe 10 by the end of the year, which is obviously not a huge amount, but there's no point flooding the air bases with huge amounts of F-16s and then having them all hit by Russian missiles. So it's probably quite wise that they're just going to tentatively introduce them. There have been releases of footage today on the socials of one being spotted circling above Lviv. There's talk about ones over Odessa area flying from Romania. So lots of rumors are circulating, lots of footage is circulating. They are there. They are going to be kitted out with American systems, and I talked about that earlier, what sort of weaponry you can expect to see on them. There are lots of articles hanging about at the moment. Here's one from the Kyiv Independent. F-16s have arrived in Ukraine. Here's how they can help fight Russia. So go and check out that breaking news update where I give you lots more detail about that. But as mentioned, they're being equipped with most of the half-decent American weapons and ordnance, just missing out on cruise missiles. But they could well be used well, I think primarily they're going to be used to shoot down cruise missiles, but I think you also might see them use guided glide bombs as well. So lots of talk about F-16s at the moment. They have finally supposedly made their way to Ukrainian airspace, which is in line with what was declared originally. I know there were some delays, but then it was kind of thought that they would be there by the end of summer, and indeed they have got there by the end of summer. So yeah, they'll be using HARM anti-radiation missiles, JDAM, those guided glide bombs. Also, I believe the French version too. Small diameter bombs, AMRAAM, so it's air to air missiles and sidewinders as well. So they will, well, I guess we're just going to have to see what role they will be playing, whether it is just air defense, close air support, offensive roles, or all of the above. Okay, this is a massive call here. Ukraine will be able to produce over 3 million drones a year, according to the ministry. So there was a claim that they're going to make 1 million this year, and they are appearing to be on course for that. The claims are that they are, well, previously the claim was they're making 90,000 a month, and of course that pretty much gives you 1 million a year over that, and now they are claiming that they can produce 3 million a year. There were claims that Ukraine has the production capacity, they just need the money. What they're lacking is the funding to really be able to make everything that they practically are able to make. Those facilities are in place. It might also be a case of needing people to work in these places too, because I was listening to a business analyst talking about how it's easy to think that women, for example, might fulfill these roles that the men would otherwise do, since the men have been sort of called up to war predominantly. But actually there's a shortage of women as well, because so many women and their children fled as refugees at the beginning of the war, and this labour shortage means that, it's just simply the fact that men and women are in short supply. Everyone is in short supply. There is that labour shortage causing a wage inflation, exactly as we've seen in Russia. It's the same problem in Ukraine, and expecting to be able to fill these jobs with women when they have their own sort of children to look after, because the men might not be around, so they become much more obviously the primary caregivers. It's just really difficult to expect women to pick up that slack. So there are issues with labour shortages, and that might impact businesses' abilities to produce exactly what is needed. Talking about drones, this is a capability that is pretty surprising. So here we have a double TM62 anti-tank mine bomb that, in this case, you can see it there, is used to take out a warehouse. There's a massive explosion there. I won't show it to you, I might get in trouble. But it dropped from a sort of Baba Yaga type drone, octocopter, hexacopter, something like that. Their ability to carry really heavy payloads is increasing, and that will mean that they can be used to devastating effect. Quite a heavy weight, that is. And that is part of the Ukrainians' ability to innovate, to improvise, and also to keep ahead of the curve, to keep ahead of the Russians in terms of what their drones can do. That is a cat and mouse game that really the Ukrainians want to be winning at all times. Drones are that important. Now, going across to Russia, raids are continuing across Russia. More claims that the police are scooping up migrants, those who have recently acquired Russian passports, and pouring them into Ukraine. This is in Yekaterinburg. Talks again of like Wildberries warehouses. That's the Russian equivalent of Amazon. Warehouses being given a once over by security forces, and I think the intention is to find as many people as they possibly can to fight for them on the front line. I think things are fairly desperate for the Russians, and they will go to some pretty big lengths to get people to fight for them. Right, now going on to geopolitical subjects, we're going to start actually with Venezuela. So Venezuela has just had this election that was completely corrupt. The results were clearly, fiddled by Maduro, the basically the dictator in charge of Venezuela. There have been huge protests going on. There have been police taking off their uniforms and joining the protesters, but you've also had security forces shooting at protesters today. I think Maduro's not long for Venezuelan. Well, but maybe, I don't know. These people will go to any length they can to keep hold of power, because if Maduro, is not in power, then he's either dead or exiled, and so there's an existential demand really on him maintaining power for his own kind of existence. So that's the backdrop to, well, I wonder where Russia fits in here. Well, the backdrop to Putin congratulating Maduro on his election victory and called him, as Anton Gerashchenko says, called him a welcome guest. Putin said that relations between the two countries had the character of a strategic partnership. Dmitry Peskov said the opposition in Venezuela should accept defeat. Quote, "We believe that the opposition should do this, should congratulate the winner of these elections," Peskov said. He called the protests in the country, quote, "attempts to rock the situation," and warned third countries against interference. Venezuela today remains Russia's main ally in the Western Hemisphere, along with Cuba and Nicaragua. They are developing military cooperation. Iran is also involved in this process, building joint businesses, particularly in the energy sector, and helping each other to circumvent sanctions. Maduro has always claimed full support for Russia in its war against Ukraine. In May 2024, Maduro said that the US and the European Union did not allow 2 years ago to conclude a peace treaty between Russia and Ukraine and continue the war to justify the profits of arms manufacturers and want to defeat Russia. Venezuela, as a possible new area of conflict, plays into Russia's hands. As I've said many times before, says Gerashchenko, the fact that Russia has not yet stopped and punished his direct consequences, an increase in escalation and violence around the world. International law and international institutions are losing their status. State leaders are beginning to speak the language of force. The fates of ordinary civilians are being taken hostage. Now, thousands of opposition supporters have come out in protest in Caracas and other Venezuelan cities. The whole world is watching as things unfold. Putin is watching too. For if Maduro is overthrown, it will be a bad sign for him. And Gerashchenko says elsewhere that Russia continues supporting Maduro. Peskov made a statement that Venezuelan opposition does not want to accept its defeat. Putin already greeted Maduro on his re-election. Meanwhile, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell said the EU would not recognise the election results until they are fully and independently verified. The Carter Centre, a non-profit organisation meant to monitor the vote on the ground, said the election failed to meet, quote, international standards of electoral integrity and could not be, quote, considered democratic. The White House said any political repression or violence against protesters or of the opposition is obviously unacceptable. So we have Russia doubling down on Venezuela, even given the protests. And who knew? The president of Serbia congratulated his fellow authoritarian friend Maduro for winning the elections. I'm curious what American ambassador, says Ivana Stradner, will think, given that he said that the government of Serbia has chosen the West. So this is the idea that some people have seen Vucic Vucic guiding his country, Serbia, closer towards the West in recent weeks, and other people have said no, that's complete nonsense. It's just smoke and mirrors. They really are in the sphere of influence of Russia, and any idea that they are cozying up to the US and the West is surely nonsense. Well, the idea that here, or the fact here, that they are congratulating Maduro for his dictatorial win, scare quotes win, shows you exactly where Serbia really are. Now, the EU has failed to adopt a joint statement on Venezuelan elections due to, guess who? Hungary's veto, according to Politico, citing sources. EU leaders were going to express concern over shortcomings and violations during the presidential election and planned a call for transparency. Josep Borrell issued a statement on his own behalf, calling for access to voting protocols at polling stations. But of course, it is who else but Hungary being the difficult members of the EU. Now, Jay in Kiev says Putin trots out his obese Hungarian kleptocrat poodle Orban to side with the brutal Maduro dictatorship. Russia now owns Hungary from top to bottom. So he's quoting, he's reacting to the news story that says here, Hungary blocks Venezuela critique. EU countries failed to agree on a joint statement criticising the dubious elections outcome in Venezuela after Hungary raised yet another veto. Two officials familiar with discussions told the Berlin Playbook. The diplomatic failure, which happened on Monday, led to EU Foreign Policy Chief Borrell issuing a statement in his own name instead of on behalf of the EU. Realising that Hungary would keep imposing its veto, Borrell issued a follow-up statement Tuesday evening, also in his own name. Quote, the election results, as already declared, cannot be recognised, Borrell said, until Nicolas Maduro's regime provides more evidence and transparency underlining his victory claims. It's just this game of chess where every country in the world appears to be taking sides. We are getting to this binary position, I think, in world geopolitics. Now, Anton Gerashchenko, to go back to him, talks about how Russian propagandists claim that Elon Musk, and this is interesting, so they're going a little bit against Elon Musk. They feel that he is betraying them a little bit. Why? They claim that Elon Musk is behind the opposition protests in Venezuela. Elon Musk is allegedly interested in bauxite deposits for Tesla, Russian propagandist Skabieva says. Yet another portion of fantasies and conspiracy theories from Russian propagandists. I wouldn't necessarily say it is a conspiracy theory. I would suggest that whoever Elon Musk supports is someone who will be able to provide Elon Musk with raw materials for his businesses or I don't know, quid pro quos such as a deregulation in an industry or the removal of an SEC investigation. In other words, he supports Trump because he's going to get deregulation of his industries, and so he can make more profit, and he can get the SEC investigation into his procurement of Twitter lifted because he's being investigated for dodginess. So that's why he's supporting Trump. Why is he supporting Russia and not Ukraine? He started with Ukraine, then realised that as all the sanctions came in, he won't be able to access all the vital raw materials he needs in Russia. And that's why he's very kind to China as well, because those two countries are absolutely vital for both SpaceX and Tesla. And if he's going out against dictators, he's been really strong on Maduro being, if you go and read Elon Musk's Twitter, because I get them on my feed every day, even though I don't want him there, but I don't mute him because it's sometimes interesting to see what he thinks. But he's been absolutely ranting about, Maduro going down because he's a dictator, and yet he says nothing about Xi Jinping being a dictator, nothing about Putin being a dictator. In other words, he's only angry about people's dictatorial characteristics if they're people he doesn't like because he's unable to get a hold of X, Y, and Z. So my guess, and this is pure speculation, is my guess that he would benefit more from having an open market in Venezuela than he would benefit from Maduro being in charge. So nothing else makes sense of why he likes one dictator but not another. It's not about the ideology of democracy here. Anyway, I thought it was interesting that the Russian propagandists have started calling him out, like he's been two-timing them or something. How dare you go and flirt with opposition leaders in Venezuela when Venezuela are our mates, etc., etc. Now, just I love this. Just to remain on Venezuela. So Matt Gaetz, who's a MAGA representative from the GOP, the Republican Party in the US, sounds like someone I know, says Ron Filipkowski to Matt Gaetz, who says, Maduro lost the election in Venezuela badly, then simply declared victory anyway. Who did that? It was 2020 to 2021. January the 6th. Something happened on January the 6th. I wonder what it was. I wonder who else lost an election but declared victory anyway. I'll get back to you on that one. I can't think who it is. Okay. I told you yesterday about German citizen Rico Krieger, who is sentenced to death in Belarus and has apparently been pardoned. So I imagine Germany's done some deal with Belarus. They've just, I presume, taken this guy for leverage. The video was published by Belarusian propagandists. In the video, a law enforcer reads out text of Krieger's pardon, which is personally signed by Lukashenko. Krieger was charged with 6 criminal offences, including mercenarism, illegal handling of firearms, and the commission of a terrorist act. So I presume he's going to be swapped for someone that the Germans have, that the Belarusians want, or indeed the Russians want. Speaking of that, actually, it's probably a good time to go to this. Now, this may be just outright rumour, or I'm not sure, but it's actually from the Moscow Times, which is an exiled major Russian media outlet. Scoop, they say, between 20 and 30 people may be released, so take it with a pinch of salt, from Russian prison in a matter of hours, including Ivan Gerskovich, so the Wall Street Journal, a Wall Street Journal journalist, and Vladimir Kara-Murza, who's a dual citizen, UK dual citizen, I think, who is also an opposition opposition activist, who's been sentenced to something ridiculous, like 25 years for basically nothing. Ilya Yashin and many others, a source familiar with planning for the exchange says. Surreal to think about it. Well, that would be huge. I wonder who would be swapped if that is indeed the case for those 20 to 30 political prisoners being exchanged. Would be massive news and great for those people involved there, of course. Finnish firm eyes the opportunity from Biden's decision to replace Chinese pork cranes. I talked about this previously. This is kind of in the whole geopolitical context of Russia and China and that closening relationship. And you've got information wars taking place where Russia and China are invading the information spaces of all of the nations of my viewers, I'm sure. And you have also the idea of the US and the EU and other nations being at economic war with Russia and to some extent with China, and often, sanctioning of Chinese entities that are helping the Russian war, but also Chinese entities as a whole, like Huawei and TikTok, and all these Chinese entities that have potentially sort of an element of dubiousness to them. Well, one of these, there was talk, I don't know, I reported it to you, I don't know, was it a year ago? These massive port cranes in the US that are Chinese constructed had either the capability of or the potential for being involved in comms interference, either somehow the construction of them or the devices that might be embedded in them, or something to do with the dodginess of these cranes. Biden has evidently come out and said he's going to replace those Chinese port cranes. So it's strengthening a rhetoric against China, which might please those China hawks that are on a Republican side. It might be a little bit of an appeasement, but also strategically quite useful. It's a delicate game to play this because you don't want to go into outright war and cause inflation and like economic warfare in a much more overt sense. However, there may be some smaller, more sensible things to achieve. Well, a Finnish firm, according to this news piece, is eyeing the opportunity to replace those cranes with Finnish ones. But interesting. And a US official tasked with imposing Russian sanctions is to join Kamala Harris's campaign as their first major hire, according to Axios. Brian Nelson, the US Treasury Department's lead official tasked with imposing and enforcing sanctions against Russia, is preparing to lead the Biden administration to join Kamala Harris's presidential campaign. Nelson, who has served at the Treasury Department as Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence since 2021, is set to join that presidential race there. So just thought I'd add that one in. And then we have this one. This came out, this was an all caps rant from Trump. As Phillips O'Brien says, I definitely want to have a drink of what he's having. So this all caps rant goes something like this. Russia never invaded Ukraine under Trump. Iran never invaded Israel under Trump. Nobody invaded anybody under Trump. China never even thought of invading Taiwan under Trump. Biggest ever embarrassment in Afghanistan would have never happened under Trump. There was no inflation under Trump. What a different world it would be under Trump. And of course, that's all ostensibly nonsense. Now, I know a lot of Republicans go, yes, it's completely true. Actually, things like Afghanistan, you need to know that the Doha Agreement was signed by and developed by the Trump administration and enforced upon the Biden administration in order that the Biden administration had to pull out of Afghanistan in agreement with the Doha Agreement, which was Trump's agreement. So, yeah, this is pretty disingenuous at best. Iran never invaded Israel under, all of this. It's just really trying to scare people. And also, I think Adam Kinzinger had a real big attack on Trump for this kind of rhetoric, where he said, actually, I was serving when, this happened. So, Soleimani, and then there's reactions to that, and we did nothing to that. Where the Iranians bombed like US bases, and how many people got brain injuries and whatever, American soldiers, and Trump did absolutely nothing. So these whole series of events where Trump was really weak on internationally in dealing with some of these dictators, and yet he makes these massive claims. But when you look at the data, he says, "Oh, we were never at war. There was no," and actually there was stuff going on all the time. In fact, if you look at the data for drone attacks, they went up. So lots of people criticize, arguably rightly, arguably not. It depends how you see drone warfare. Talking about the big Reaper drones dropping bombs, often on places with a lot of collateral damage. But anyway, those kind of drone strikes went absolutely spiked under Obama, and Obama got rinsed for that by people who were dead against drone strikes. And actually, Trump came in and they went up even further. And yet Obama was one that seemed to get rinsed, and Trump got off scot-free. But there was a lot of warfare going on under Trump. It was just, under the radar kind of warfare. Anyway, just watch out for stuff like this. Always think, well, how might this not be correct? Because actually, ostensibly, it's not correct. But it's a really common talking point, and you hear an awful lot. And just I want to give props to Talaria. So VLP, as she is on Twitter, got loads of stuff on her Knowledge is Power Substack. Absolutely loads of great information there. This one about NATO expansion, Putin's propaganda myth, is really important, because we hear this argument about how NATO is supposedly at fault for, and to blame for this war because of their expansionism, and all these arguments that the Russians often throw out into the information space to see if it sticks. And this is another great article that puts that to bed. So go and check out Knowledge is Power, vlp888.substack.com. Anyway, that's enough from me. I really appreciate your support, guys. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.